If you're building projects with React, you should learn how to use React Router. This course covers everything about routing with React using React Router. You'll learn about setting up basic routes, protecting authenticated routes, custom route transitions, and more. Nattira Maneerat teaches this course. He uses animated visuals and focuses on real-world application building.
All work together to handle routing and render the appropriate components based on the URL. We'll cover essential topics like handling common routing issues, passing and accessing URL parameters, redirecting users to specific routes, and implementing nested routes for hierarchical navigation. We'll also explore advanced techniques such as lazy loading, route transitions, and route guards. Throughout this course, we'll work on practical examples and real-world projects, putting your newfound knowledge into action. By the end of this course, you have confidence and expertise to implement robust routing in your own React applications. You'll be able to handle complex routing scenarios, optimize performance, secure routes, and provide a seamless user experience. So get ready to embark on this React Router adventure with me. Welcome to the Introduction to React Router section of our course. In this module, we will explore what React Router is, its purpose, and the benefit it brings to our React applications. We'll also discuss the different versions available, so let's get started. React Router is a powerful routing library specifically designed for React applications. It provides a declarative way to handle routing, allowing us to create single-page applications with multiple views or pages. With React Router, we can define different routes in our application and render appropriate components based on the current URL. The main purpose of React Router is to enable seamless navigation and provide a consistent user experience within our React applications. It allows us to create links, handle URL changes, and update the rendered components based on the routes defined in our application. Let's explore some of the key benefits of using React Router. Declarative routing. React Router offers a declarative approach to routing, meaning we can define our route using a simple and intuitive syntax. This makes it easier to understand and maintain our application's routing logic. Nested routing. React Router supports nested routing, allowing us to create complex application structures with multiple levels of nested routes. This is particularly useful when building applications with different sections or subpages. Dynamic routing. React Router enables us to handle dynamic routing by supporting parameters in our routes. We can define route patterns that match specific URL patterns, extract parameters from the URL, and pass them as props to the rendered components. This flexibility is invaluable when dealing with dynamic content or user-specific data. Programmatic navigation. React Router provides an API for programmatic navigation, allowing us to navigate to different routes programmatically. We can trigger route changes based on our user actions, application logic, or even external events. This gives us full control over the navigation flow of our application. Code splitting and lazy loading. React Router integrates seamlessly with code splitting and lazy loading techniques. This means we can load components and routes on demand, optimizing the initial load time of our application. It's especially beneficial for larger applications with numerous routes and complex component hierarchies.
Hello guys, so this is the first project we are going to build to learn React Router. It's kind of like a GitHub Explorer site. This is the home page that shows random GitHub repos, as you can see over here. And then if you click on a repo, we go to the repo detail page. As you can see, we have some information about the repo over here. Then if we head over to the users page from the navbar, as you can see, we have a list of random users, just as we had a list of random repos. And also, if we click on a single user, we also go to the user details page where we can see more information about the user. Then we go to the user search page where we have a search functionality that searches for GitHub users. So you can just type in your own username and you're going to see your details. Now, if we click on the profile link from the search bar, you can see that it takes us to the login page. Well, that's because the profile page is a protected route and it requires authentication to be accessed. So you are going to learn how to implement protected routes in this project. However, if we log into the application and go back to the profile page, you can see that my GitHub profile is now popping up with a bit of information about me. So with this, you are going to learn how to implement protected routes in your applications using React Router. Alright, that's an overview of what we're going to be building for a start. And with this, you are going to learn pretty much everything about routing using React Router. Let's begin immediately.
Welcome back, guys. In this lesson, we are going to be creating our first React application and also installing React Router. I assume you already know how to create a React application. If not, just make sure you already have a recent Node version installed in your machine. And the way you can do that is by simply going to your browser, search install Node, and the first link you see here with download node.js, click on it, and then install the appropriate node for your machine. Alright, now let's head back to our terminal and create our first React app. So to do that, all we need to do is type npx create-react-app and then the name of our app. In this case, the app we're going to be building is going to be called Git Explorer. So we're just going to say Git-Explorer, just like this. Now hit enter. This is going to take a couple of minutes, but just allow it to finish working and we can continue from there. Alright, now that we have our project installed for us by npm, let's open it in our code editor. For me, I'm using VS Code as my code editor. If you happen to be using a different code editor, please feel free to continue using it. So all I'm going to do is, within my terminal, I'm going to say cd git-explorer, which is the name of the app we just created, and then hit enter. That is going to take us to our project directory. I'm just going to clear my terminal here, and then to open my project in VS Code, all I have to do within the terminal is run the command code dot, just like this. Hit enter, and VS Code is going to open our project for us. Cool. Alright, now that we've built our project and opened it in our code editor, let's launch our project first and see it in the browser, and then we install React Router afterwards. Now, head back to the terminal again and type the command npm start. Hit enter. As you might know already, this is going to open our project for us in the browser. Let's just wait for that to happen. Alright, as you can see, we have the spinning React logo over here and our project is working properly. Alright, now let's go back to our terminal. We're just going to kill the process here with Ctrl+C or Command+C. And now let's install React Router. So to do that, we're going to run the command npm install react-router-dom. So just npm install React Router DOM, just like this, and then we hit enter. So yeah, once that's done running, let's head back to our code and see if we have our React Router properly installed. Now, back in our code editor, open the package.json file in our project directory. And in our project dependencies, we should see React Router DOM as one of our project dependencies over here. If you see that, it means your React Router DOM has been properly installed. Alright, now in the next lesson, we are going to be going over a few concepts you need to understand about React Router for you to be able to properly use it. Hello guys, welcome back to this lesson. In this lesson, we will set up our project to use React Router to enable us to implement routing functionality within our application. To do so, we simply need to wrap our entire application inside of a React Router component called the browser router. What is a browser router? The browser router component is a high-level component that wraps our entire application. It utilizes HTML5 history API to keep your UI in sync with the URL. it provides the routing functionality for your application by listening to changes in the URL and rendering the appropriate components based on the defined routes. So at the base of our routing functionality is the browser router component. Let's head over to our code and see how we can set up our application for routing using the browser router. So if we go to our app.js over here, first of all, let's import the browser router from React Router DOM. So we see import browser router from React Router DOM. Just like this. Now we said our browser router needs to wrap our entire application, right? And our app.js is the entry point to our application and all other pages we might have in it. So let's wrap all the components inside of our app.js inside our browser router. So in our return statement, we're just going to call the router component, copy the div over here, and paste it inside. If we head back to our browser, let's refresh and see if that works perfectly. Oh, we have an error here. Alright, we have an import error here. Seems like I omitted the T of React. So if we head back to our code, I'm just going to add the T over here. Head back. Now if I refresh the page, everything seems to be working fine. So our router seems to be working perfectly. However, since the browser router is supposed to wrap our entire application, it's completely fine to use it like this. But it will certainly make more sense if we go to our index.js file and wrap our app component inside of it rather than wrapping all the components inside of our app.js. I hope that makes sense. So in our index.js file, we're just going to import the browser router again. So we say import browser router. And inside of our React.strict mode, we're just going to call the component and simply paste our app component inside of it. This offers a more robust way of wrapping our component inside of our browser router to use the routing functionality. Alright, so now we just have to go back to our app.js and remove the browser router component we called here, since we are now using it in our index.js file. Now with this, we have set up our application to use the routing functionality. In the next lesson, we will see this in action when we create different pages and switch between them in real time using other powerful React Router components. Welcome back to this lesson, guys. Now let's go over a few React Router components before we head over to our code and start using them. In the previous lesson, we saw how we can set up our application to use router functionality by wrapping our app component in the browser router component. Now, to actually define a route to another page in our browser, we use the route component of the React Router library. The route component is used to define a route and specify the component to render when the URL matches that route. It takes two main props. It takes a path prop, which specifies the URL pattern to match, and an element prop, which specifies the React component to render when the URL matches the path. Now let's head back over to our code and see how we can define a route to take us to another page in our browser and display the component we want to render in that page. Back in our code, let's clear the JSX in our app component and change it to a home page route component. So I'm just going to cut the div over here, everything inside the div from the header. I'm going to cut that, and then I will define a home component right above the app component, just like this. And then the home component is simply going to return a h1 that says home page, just like this. Right below it, let's create an about us component which we will render in another page. So const about us, and this is going to return a h1 that says about us page. just like this. Oh, this should be small letter H, right? All right, now let's use the router components from React Router DOM to show these individual components based on the URL path specified. First, let's import it. So over here at the top of our file, we just have to say import inside curly braces route from React Router DOM. Alright, now that we've imported our route component from React Router DOM, so inside our app function, let's define our route components and display our pages individually. So in here, we just have to say route, just like this. Like I said before, the route component takes two props, a path prop and an element prop. So in here, we have to specify the path in which we'll follow to reach that page in our browser. So path is going to be equal to, for the home page, we want it to be the root of our URL. So over here, we're just going to put a /, which signifies the root of our URL. Also, if you want to render an app to be the root of your URL, apart from adding a / in your path, we should also add an exact keyword. This is going to make sure our route outputs the right component at the exact root of our project. Right, so now we need to add the element prop. And this is going to take the React component which is going to be rendered when the user goes to the path. So at the root URL of our project, we want to display the home page. So in here, just like we display components, we are just going to display our home component. Now that we define our new route, let's test it before we add the second route, which is going to be our About Us page. So let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. As you can see, we have an error which says a route is only ever to be used as the child of route element. So what does this error mean? React is telling us that we can only render a route inside of a route component, not a div container, as we have done back in our code. The routes component, apart from being the plural of route, it helps in rendering a single route exclusively by wrapping multiple route components within it. If no match is found, a default not found component can be rendered. I know this might sound confusing at the beginning, but let's actually see how this works, and it should be really easy for you to grasp. So instead of having our div over here, we just have to turn this div into a route component, just like this. And again, VS Code automatically imported it for me, but you can go up here. You can go up here, add a comma, and add the routes here. So now we've imported our route and our routes, and that's what we have here. So in order for you to have a route component, you need to wrap it inside of a routes component. That is the only way you can have routes that leads to other pages. Now, if I head back to our code in the browser, you can see it works perfectly for us. We have the homepage component displaying. All right. So let's head back to our code and actually create another route for the About Us component we created earlier. So inside of our route component, let's copy and paste our home route and then change it to go to the About Us page. So since we said the exact keyword should only be used for the root URL of your project, we need to remove it here since we want to add another path. So over here, after the /, we just need to specify a new path for our About Us page, which is simply going to be about, and then we change the element to be rendered to our About Us element, just like this. I think this should be pretty intuitive. Now let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. Over at the URL, let's add a /about for the new route we created, and if I hit enter, you can see we have a new component being rendered for us, About Us page.
Okay guys, I need you guys to clone this repo as it has all the boilerplate code needed for this project. So there's going to be a link in the description that leads to this repo, right? So all you have to do is click on this code, copy this link, open your terminal, cmd, and then you simply git clone, and then you paste the link, and then you hit enter. Now this is going to clone the entire repo into your computer, and if you come to the source folder over here, the component, You see we have a list of components. These are all the components we need with the boilerplate code to begin working with React Router. Alright, I'll see you in the further videos.
Alright, now that we've created our user.js file and we've pasted our boilerplate code, let's head back to our app.js and add a new route. So in our app.js, just like we have our home and about us routes, I'm just going to copy one of them and I'm going to change the path to users, and the component is going to be our users component, which we just created. Alright, that's it. Let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. In the URL, we are going to go to /users, hit enter. You can see that works perfectly fine. In the next lesson, we are going to learn how to navigate between pages, specifically from our users page to our home page. That is going to be a fun one to learn. Welcome back, guys. Now let's see how we can navigate from the home page to the users page. In React Router, there are a couple of ways we can navigate between pages. The link component of the React Router library allows us to achieve this without reloading our application, as a mere HTML anchor tag might do. Let's see how we can achieve this. Back in our home page, let's import the link component from React Router DOM. So here I'm just going to say import link from React Router DOM, just like this. So if I scroll to the bottom of our map function over here, after the H1 loading, let's make use of our link component and actually see how it navigates us from one page to another. So I'm just going to create an opening and closing tag for our link component, just like this. And then we can put our placeholder to be go to users page, just like this. But before this link component can dynamically navigate us to another page, we have to specify the route of the page we want it to take us to. For that, the link component has a prop that takes a URL path as its value. Let's see how that works. Inside the opening tag of our link component, we are going to type to, as in to, is equal to, and then opening and closing quotes. And this is where we specify the URL path we want this link to take us to when we click on it. For this case, we simply put /users, as that is the page we want it to navigate us to. Alright, let's head back to our code and see if this works. Now in our home page, let's just give it a reload. Somewhere at the end of our home page, you can see we have a button that says go to users page. Although this button is not properly formatted, we just need to test it and see how to navigate from one page to another. In the upcoming lessons, we are going to make this even better. Now, if I click on this button, you can see it takes us to the users page, and that works perfectly fine. So we use the link component within our JSX to navigate from one page to another. Each time you use the HTML anchor tag to navigate from one page to another, it reloads your entire application and the state has to restart. But when we use the React Router link component, it just kind of changes the component that is being rendered on the screen without altering the state of any other component within our application. And this is really powerful. Alright, welcome back to this lesson, guys. In this lesson, we'll set up our navbar. Here we'll learn how to deal with components that need to be in all our pages, like a navbar and footer component, using nested routing. First of all, let's handle showing our navbar in all pages regardless of the route, and then we'll make changes to our navbar file to dynamically navigate us to different pages on button clicks. In order to be able to render our navbar component in all pages, we need to nest all needed components inside our navbar route. Let's head back to our app.js file, and then we define our navbar route. So inside of our routes, we are just going to create another route. And since we will nest other components inside of it, we will create it with opening and closing tags, just like this. Then let's import our navbar component, just like this. And then we pass our navbar component as our element prop, just like this. And then for the path prop, we just add a /. The path has to be a / because we want it to appear in all other subroutes nested within it. And that will not clash with our homepage path because the exact keyword we use there will simply make sure that is the exact component that shows on that path. Now, let's cut all other routes and nest them inside of our navbar route. Just like this. With this, our nav component will show up in every route nested inside of it. Let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. So if I refresh the page, you can see that we clearly have a problem. Only the navbar component is being displayed. Let's try going to the users page to see if we have the same problem over there too. /users, I hit enter. As you can see, even at the users page, we have only the navbar being displayed. The problem here is that although we nested all other components inside of our nav and we said that should work, we actually needed a way to tell our navbar component to render child components nested inside of it. For that, React Router offers an outlet component that allows us to do this. Let's go to our navbar.js file and make use of this component in real time. First, let's import the outlet component from React Router DOM. So over here, I'm just going to import outlet from React Router DOM, just like this. Then since we want to render all other child components right below our nav, in between the nav HTML tag and the container tag, we simply impute our outlet tag. So over here, we say outlet, just like this. Now, if we head back to our browser and refresh the page, as you can see, we have the navbar and the home component showing. Let's go to the users page and see if that works too. Alright, that works. Now that we've seen how we can nest routes with our navbar example, let's head over to our code and make sure our navbar links actually take us to the appropriate pages when we click on them. Back in our navbar.js file, if we recall in previous lessons, we said that using basic HTML anchor tags for navigation is usually a bad idea. I mean, we can easily specify the path we want within each anchor tag, but the problem is that they reload our application. This means that whenever we navigate to another route in our application using an anchor tag, your app state resets, and that is simply not ideal. So the solution to this, as you might have guessed, is the React Router link component. This is the same component we used when we tested navigation between pages. Now let's use that here as well. So we first need to import link from React Router DOM. Over here where we imported our outlet, we just need to add a comma and also import the link component. And then we can simply clear our anchor tag along with its href and change it to a link tag. So over here, I'm just going to clear the href plus the anchor tag and change this to a link tag. Alright. So the link tag takes a prop for the URL path to take us to when it is clicked. So over here, the prop is to, as in to, is equal to, and in here, we can specify a path we want it to take us to. So in quotes, we are just going to put a / since we want to go to the home page when we click on the Git Explorer link. Alright, let's also change the anchor tag here to a link tag and specify the path we want it to take us to also be a / because the home page is also the page that shows the repos, right? So this is going to take the same path as the Git Explorer link. Alright, let's do the same for our users anchor tag. I'm just going to clear the anchor tag here, put a link component, and then the path to take us to is going to be /users. Alright, let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. Back in our browser, since we're on the users page over here, if I click on the Git Explorer, it should take us to the home page right now. As you can see, that works. Let's also click on the users link and see if it takes us to the users page. Alright, That works. And you can see how this works instantaneously. That is because our application doesn't fully reload. It only renders a new component when we click on the link, since we use the React Router link component to achieve this. Alright, in the next lesson, we are going to create a page not found route that shows up when a user goes to a route that doesn't match any route we defined. Alright guys, welcome back to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to create a default route that renders whenever a user goes to an unmatched URL in our browser. So let's create a notfound.js file inside of our component folder. Notfound.js. Let's create and export our JSX so we can see const notfound is equal to an arrow function. And this is simply going to return, a div. This is simply going to return a div tag. Inside of our div, we can define a h1 tag that says page not found. And below that, we can use a link tag that says go back to homepage. And inside the link tag, we can specify the path to take us to, which is simply the / to take us back home. We actually need to import our link component from React Router DOM. So I'm just going to say import link. And I have a suggestion here from React Router DOM. And then right below, we just need to export our component. Export default not found. Another typo. Okay. Now let's head over to our app.js and import our new not found component. So over here, we're just going to import not found from component not found. All right. Since this route is meant to show up whenever a user goes to a page that doesn't exist, it makes sense for us to render it as a standalone route. That means we don't have to nest it inside of our navbar component. So right below our navbar closing route, we can create another route just like this and set our element prop to be our not found component, not found, just like this. Now comes the important thing. Again, since we want the not found component to always show up in every route that doesn't exist in our application, the value of our path prop, which I'm going to create, the value of our path prop is going to be the wildcard symbol. Just like this. With this, whenever we go to an unmatched route, this will be the component that will pop up. Let's test that out. So back in our browser, let's go to a route we know we never created in this application. So let's just try /products and hit enter. As you can see, we have our not found component being rendered for us. Let's try another random route. So I'm just going to input a random word here, hit enter, and we still have our not found page. And if we click go back to home page, this works perfectly fine, as you can see. If we also click on the users page, this works perfectly fine. But as soon as we go to a route that doesn't exist, we should see our not found component being rendered to us over here. All right. Hello guys, welcome to this lesson. In React Router, the route parameters allow you to define dynamic segments in your routes. These dynamic segments can be extracted from the URL and used as variables in your component. This feature is particularly useful when you have routes with dynamic data, such as user profiles, product details, or blog post pages. These are just examples. Now let's see how we can make use of route parameters and dynamic routing in our application. So we'll say import user profile Alright, after that, we simply create a route for it. We want the navbar to display inside this page, so we'll nest it inside of our nav route. So in here, let's create another route. And then we give it an element prop of our user profile component, just like this. And the path prop is going to be /users/user. Alright. Let's head over to our browser and actually see if this works. So in our browser, we simply need to change the URL to /users and /user, just like this. And as you can see, that instantly works. It shows my GitHub profile, my username, my name, my location, my bio, and my profile image. Alright, this works perfectly. Now, we're going to implement a functionality for this page to show a profile for whichever user we click from the users list page. So whenever we click on this view user, we want to navigate to this page and show whichever user we clicked from that page, right? However, since the profile page is a route on its own, we can't pass props to it. So the solution to this problem is adding URL parameters to our route. So that means we can add another parameter to this URL and then grab the value of that parameter within our code using React Router's useParams function. Now let's actually see how we can add parameters to our URL and grab that within our code. In our app.js file, we only need to add a column and then the name of the parameter we are looking for. Over here inside the path, we first of all need to add a / and then a column and then the name of the parameter we are looking for within our component. So we are looking for the user's username. So we simply add that here. So we simply type username, just like this. Cool. Then we can go to our user profile component and grab that parameter value. So above, I'm just going to import use params from React Router DOM, just like this. Then inside of our component function, we can grab the parameter we want by destructuring it from the useParams function. So we are just going to say const, then we destructure username is equal to useParams. And this is a function, just like this. This has to be the exact value we gave it in our route component back in our app.js file, right? Now with this, we have our parameter value, and to actually test this out, let's just create a h1 tag over here and call the username parameter to see if this works. Alright, let's head over to our code, refresh the page and see if this actually works. So as you can see, we have a page not found here because we no longer have a page that has this path. Rather, the path we have has another parameter it's looking for, which is the username parameter. So here, let's just add the random username value. So I'm just going to say /Adam. And if I hit enter, we have the Adam keyword over here, which is the URL parameter we added. Let's use another value to actually see if this works. So I'm just going to say John. If I hit enter, this is now John. As you can see, this is how we can add parameters and get it within our component using the useParams function from React Router DOM. Now, we want to pass this parameter to our GitHub API URL inside of our useEffect function. Over here, where we have my GitHub username, we can just change this to a dynamic value, just like this, and then we can add the username. Instead of this being a static value of my username, this is now going to be whatever parameter we input in our browser. Let's actually head back over to our browser and see if this works. Let's test the username John. And as you can see, we have John. John appears to be a potato. Let's test another username, and let's say Angela. Angela also works. Angela appears to be a Wonder Woman. Cool. As you can see, this works. Let's remove this H1 tag. It's actually messing things up, so I'm going to remove it over here. As you can see, this clearly works. If we give this parameter a username, it's actually going to bring up that GitHub user's profile and display it for us over here. Let's go back to the username we used before, which is my username. I'm just going to say Kolosafo. Now you can also try this by inputting your GitHub username and see if it actually works. But as you can see, it clearly works for us. Finally, let's head over to our users component and see how we can navigate to the user's profile page when a button is clicked. To do that, we simply change this button over here to a link tag. So I'm just going to change it to a link tag, and we actually need to import that from React Router DOM. Import link from React Router DOM, just like this. The path we are going to specify should be to the user profile page. So we need to grab the username and pass it to the path. So instead of using quotes, we are going to use backticks. And then let's start with the path, which is /users, /user, and then /. And now we're just going to use the username value as our parameter. So we say $, curly braces, and that should be user.login. Just like this. This is the value for our username. Now, if I head back to our code, if we now click on this view user link, it should take us to the user profile page and actually display this specific user's profile. All right, let's test that out. Let's start with this first user. If I click on the link, as you can see, we have this user's profile. This is their username, their name, their location, and their follow account. If we go back and select another random user, such as this one, you can see this also shows their profile. If this lesson for some reason seems confusing to you, don't worry too much. You are going to get enough practice in this course to grasp all the concepts and become confident with them. In this section, we will be learning about programmatic navigation. But what is that? Programmatic navigation in React Router refers to the ability to navigate between different routes in your application using JavaScript code. Instead of relying on user interactions like clicking on links or buttons, programmatic navigation allows you to programmatically trigger route changes based on certain conditions or events in your application. Now, let's head over to our code and see how that works. After that, let's head over to our app.js file and create a new route for it. So in our app.js, first of all, let's import it. Import search user. And then still inside of our navigation route, since we want this to also have our navbar, we're just going to create a new route inside of there. So the element prop is going to be our search user component, just like this. And the path URL is simply going to be /search, just like this. Now let's go to our browser and see if this works. Refresh the page, and there we go, we have it. It's a simple form with one input and a submit button. Alright, we will make use of the use navigate hook of the React Router to programmatically navigate between pages. The use navigate hook allows us to navigate between pages without the need of components. So far, we've only been navigating using the link component. Now let's see how we can do the same thing programmatically using the use navigate hook. If we head over to our users.js file over here, you see we have a link component that handles navigation for us. Let's change this to a button HTML tag, just like this. Now we can navigate to any page we want without actually using a link component thanks to the use navigate hook. Let's import it and see for ourselves. So over here, right beside the link component, we can just say use navigate, and then we initialize it into a variable. So we'll say const navigate is equal to use navigate, just like this. Now we've initialized it into a variable which we can now use anywhere in our code. Now let's head down to our button tag and let's make use of the hook inside of an onClick handler. So inside of our opening button tag, we are just going to use an onClick handler here. And inside of the onClick handler, we can call our useNavigate function. All right, now let's declare an arrow function. And then here, we can call our navigate function, just like this. So when we use the link component, we navigated to the user's profile page and passed the username as the path parameter. We're going to do exactly that over here. So we're going to use backticks, and the URL path is users, and the URL path is /users/user, and then the username. So here we're just going to grab our username variable, $curly braces, and then we're just going to say user.login, which is the value of our username, just like this. All right, let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. I'm just going to go to the users page, allow that to load, and let's click on this view user button to see if that actually works. We'll click on it. Yes, as you can see, we are still getting navigated to our user profile page and everything works perfectly fine. And you can really see the convenience of this. The useNavigate hook has made it possible for us to trigger navigation from any HTML tag. You can have an image with an onClick handler using the useNavigate hook to redirect users to another page when the image is clicked. In this lesson, we would learn how to redirect or navigate a user to a specific page based on application logic. Let's head over to our searchuser.js file over here and immediately import the useNavigate hook from React Router DOM. So above, we're just going to say import useNavigate from React Router DOM, just like this. Well, as you can see, we have a handle get user function over here that is triggered inside of our handle submit function. Don't worry too much about these. Inside the handle get user function, we send the request to the GitHub API to get a specific user for us, and then there's an if statement to check if that user actually exists. So inside this if statement, we want to navigate the user to the profile page if the user searched does exist. And if the user doesn't exist, we have a catch method over here that displays the message user does not exist and the number of attempts you have left, right? This is a typical use case for programmatic redirect. Think of this as an authentication functionality where your users attempt to log into your website and then you redirect them to another page after successful authentication. Let's see how that works for this application. First of all, we import our useNavigate hook from React Router DOM, which I've already done over here. And then down here, let's initialize it into a variable like we did in our previous lesson. So we say const navigate is equal to useNavigate, just like this. Then inside of our if statement, when the user is found, we call the navigate object, which we just created, and then in parentheses, we impute the page we want to navigate to, just like we did in the previous lesson. So we say navigate, parentheses, and then the page we want to navigate the user to when this works. In this case, we want to navigate the user to the user's profile. So we are going to use backticks, /users/user, and then the user which was searched. So we say $curly braces, that should be dollar not $4, $curly braces, and then the username imputed. All right. Now let's head over to our browser and see if this actually works. So back in our browser, we just have to go to /search, just like this. And then let's try and search for a possible GitHub user. Let's try the name Jonathan. I hit enter. All right, Jonathan does exist. And then you see we have Jonathan's GitHub profile over here. Let's attempt a random name that might not exist. So in here, I'm just going to put random characters, submit. And as you can see, we have our error message, user does not exist, 2 attempts remaining. Let's head back to our searchuser.js file. we have a use effect hook inside of which we have an if statement that is meant to tell the user they are out of attempts. So inside of here, we also want to redirect the user back to the home page after a few seconds. So when the user runs out of attempts, instead of just saying too many attempts redirecting, we want to actually redirect the user back to the home page after a few seconds. And for that, we are going to use a timeout function. So right below our set error message over here, we're just going to call a set timeout function. And we're going to set this timeout to 3 seconds. So this is going to run after 3 seconds. And inside here, we can call our useNavigate function to navigate the user back to the home page when this is triggered. Again, we already initiate our useNavigate hook over here, so we can use that variable inside of our timeout function. So here, we simply say navigate, and then we specify the URL we want to navigate the user to, which is our home page, so we input / over here. Let's also add the navigate variable as our use effect dependency. So over here, I'm just going to add it, navigate, just like this. All right, let's head over to our browser and see if this actually works. So back in our browser, I'm just going to refresh the page. Now let's attempt a random username we know cannot be a username for a GitHub user. All right, I'm just going to input random strings, hit enter. Now, as you can see, user does not exist, 2 attempts remaining. Submit the form again. We now have 1 attempt remaining. Submit the form again, too many attempts redirecting. After 3 seconds, as you can see, we get redirected back to our home page. This is exactly what we wanted, and that works. Now, at the end of this course, we will build a project that uses more complex navigation. That is where you will solidify all of these concepts and become a pro in React Router. So don't worry too much if you don't understand all of these concepts at this time. By the time we build more complex projects, you will understand all of these concepts pretty much easily. In this lesson, we are going to be talking about route guards. Route guards, in the context of React Router, refers to a mechanism that allows us to control access to routes based on certain conditions or rules. They are used to protect certain routes in your application and ensure that the user meets certain criteria before accessing those routes. A typical use case of this are pages that hold sensitive data and requires a user to log in to access that page. Alright, let's head back to our code and see how that works. Our auth profile component is similar to the single user component, but it has a bit more information and obviously shows the logged in user's GitHub profile, as we'll see shortly. Whereas in the login.js component, we have a login functionality with a dummy user object that redirects us to the auth profile page when the user is successfully logged in. So this is the dummy user object. You can change it to whatever object you want, and then this is what we are going to be using to log in. I just kind of use this to mimic a login scenario, so we don't have to be playing around with any live APIs. Alright, if you want to change the username, just make sure it's actually a username that exists inside of GitHub. So this doesn't return an error when we are working, but you can just leave it at mine and we are going to work with that perfectly. We'll see how we can protect the auth profile component and make it only accessible when the user is authenticated. Now let's see how we can achieve that. First of all, let's head over to our app.js file and let's create individual routes for our login and auth profile pages. Again, we will nest it inside of our navbar route, and then here we can create another route just like this. We set the first element to our login component, and then we can set the path to simply be /login, just like this. I'm just going to copy and paste this, and then we'll change the component to our auth profile component. Obviously, you have to import that above, and then we can change the path to auth profile, just like this. After that, we need to define a few state values for our authentication to work. We need a username state variable. So still inside of our app.js, we're just going to create a state variable, say const, username, and then set username. Then we can set that to a use state, just like this. We also need an isLogged state variable. Just like we have our username over here, we just have to create another one and say const isLogged set isLogged, and then we simply set that to false. This is going to be a boolean that holds the state of the authentication. All right, so let's just put quotes over here. All right, now in our login route, inside of our login component, we need to pass a set isLogged prop and a set username prop. So let's just define them here. Set isLogged is equal to set isLogged, just like this, and then we also pass set username as the set username prop, just like this. Now for our auth profile, we only need to add the username prop. So in here, we're just going to say username, and then we put our username as the value. All right. Now let's test this component and see if they actually work before we get the route. If we head back to our browser and go to /login first, and then in our login.js file, you can see that the dummy user object we have is set to username, kolosafo, and then password 12345. So make sure this is the exact username and password you input. If not, this is not going to work. All right. So here I'm just going to say kolosafo, and then our password will be 12345. If I hit submit, as you can see, it takes us to the auth profile page over here, and it says your profile, and it has my GitHub profile information. All right, that works perfectly. Now let's implement route guarding. So whenever we come to this component, actually let's refresh and see what happens. You see, we have nothing displaying here, which means the user is not authenticated, and we don't actually know which user to grab from GitHub because there is no authenticated user. So we need to guard this route. So whenever a user attempts to come to this route without being authenticated, they get redirected back to the login page. I hope that makes sense. Let's head back to our code and see how that works. All right. So React Router offers a component called Navigate. This is different from the useNavigate hook. The Navigate component prevents a page from showing up and redirects to another page based on our application logic. Let's see how that works. Still inside of our app.js file, let's import the Navigate from React Router DOM. So up here, just where we have the route and routes from React Router DOM, we're just going to add a comma and call the Navigate hook, just like this. Oh, this is supposed to be a comma, not a full stop. All right. Now, as we've imported the Navigate component, let's see how we can use that to protect our route. So obviously, the route we want to protect is the auth profile route. And the way we do that, inside of our element prop, we are going to add a condition to check if the user is logged or not. And if the user is logged, we want to display this auth profile component. If not, we'll use the Navigate component to redirect the user back to the login page. Inside of our element prop of the auth profile route, we're just going to add a condition here and say, so we'll use a ternary expression. So we'll say is logged and then a comma. And this simply means if it's logged, do this. And then at the end, we are going to add a column, else we need to do something else. And this is where we are going to use our Navigate component. So we call the Navigate, just like this. So first of all, what this logic basically does is it checks if the user is logged, and if that is true, it's going to show the auth profile component. If not, this Navigate component is going to trigger. Now inside this Navigate component, let's specify what pages to navigate back to if the user is not authenticated. Inside the Navigate component, let's pass a replace prop to it, just like this. And this basically means we want to replace this route with another route. All right, so after the replace, and then we add a to prop and tell you what route to go to. So we want to take the user to the login page if the user is not authenticated. I think this is pretty intuitive. So the Navigate component replaces this route with the login route if the user is not logged. That's basically what this whole line of code does. All right, let's head back to our browser and see if this actually works. So back in our browser, let's test that by simply trying to go to the auth profile page from the URL. If I hit enter, you see we keep getting redirected back to the login page. And if I try that again, as you can see, if I hit enter, we keep getting navigated back to our login page. And that works. Now let's actually log in and see if we get redirected to the auth profile page properly. So we've seen one side of the coin. Now let's log in and see if it works. Kussrow, and then password 12345. If I hit submit, now you can see we have our auth profile page rendering for us. That's because we logged in and the user is now authenticated. And that's why this works. If I try to reload this page, we should get redirected back to our login route since our application state is going to restart. All right, let's reload and see. As you can see, we get redirected back to the login page. And again, let's try to go to the auth profile page dynamically from the URL. If I hit enter, we still get redirected. So this is how you protect routes in React Router using the navigate component. Again, I can understand if this is a bit overwhelming for a start. But just as I assume you now know perfectly how to create a route and use the link component to navigate between pages, you will get enough practice to grasp every other concept regarding React Router as we move into building projects in the later sections of this course. Alright guys, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll reconstruct our navbar and add a few links to it. So just code along with me. So we're going to add two more links, our search link. So we'll just say link. So we create a link component and we set the path to /search. And this should have a closing tag actually. And the value is going to be search, just like this. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And then we'll create one for our auth user profile. So that should be auth profile. And then we're just going to see profile. And lastly, we need to add a link to the login page. But what we want to do is, we only want the login link to appear when the user is not logged in. So to do that, we are going to take an isLogged prop. So we say it's logged. And then we'll use that to check if the user is logged. And that is the only time we want to display our login button or link. All right. So we'll add the logic here and say, if not, it's logged. So if it's logged is false, that is the only time we want the login button to appear. So in here, we'll just copy and paste this. Oh, we need to use the AND operator, just like this. So if the button is logged, this will happen. So we want the login. The path will be login and the value will be login. All right. So if I head back to the browser and refresh, now let's try and log in. We can see we have the buttons here. We have the search, profile, and login. So all of these should work. We have the search button, the profile button. Obviously, we added a logic. Obviously, we added a route guard that doesn't allow us to access the profile page unless we are logged in. So that is why if we click on the profile link, it brings us back to the login page. All right, now that we're in the login page, let's actually log in and see if the login link is going to disappear afterwards. So the username is Kussrow and the password is 12345. If I hit submit, it takes us to the profile page, but the login link is still there. That's because we forgot to pass the isLogged prop back in our app.js file. So over here, in the navbar nested route, inside the navbar component, we'll just add the prop isLogged, and then we'll grab this isLogged value over here, just like this. Now, as you can see, the login link has disappeared. And if I refresh, as you can see, we now have it. If I log in again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I hit submit and the login link disappears. All right, that's the only thing we wanted to do for this lesson. And in the next section, we'll move into more advanced topics on React Router. Thank you so much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. In this lesson, we'll explore using animations in React Router for a better user experience. Alright, we will use React Transition Group to achieve this. You can use other libraries like FramerMotion or any other one you want as well. I chose React Transition Group simply because it's easy and uses pure CSS for its animation. So everyone should be able to follow along. Alright, let's install React Transition Group in our project. Now let's head to our terminal and terminate the process. And then we do npm install React Transition Group. Just like this. We hit enter and allow that to install. Alright, once that's done installing, let's do npm start again. So we have our project running throughout. Sorry for the noise in the background. Apparently my neighbor is having a construction. Alright, we have our project back up and running. Now let's head back to our app.js file, and we need to import two components from React Transition Group. We need the switch transition component. So let's import switch transition component. The switch transition component basically acts as a wrapper for all elements or routes in this case that will inherit from the transition animation. The other component we need from React Transition is CSS transition. So we say CSS transition. As you can see, we have a suggestion here. So these are the two transition components we need from React Transition to achieve our goal. All right. So in order for this to work, we need to nest our entire route component inside of our switch transition and CSS transition components. So let's define them up here. So we say switch transition. And then inside of it, we also create the CSS transition tag, just like this. Then we cut our entire route components and everything inside of it. And then we paste it inside our CSS transition component, just like this. So what we just did is we basically just wrapped our entire route inside of switch transition and CSS transition components. All right. But before this can work, we need to define the animation effect we want during the transition, the time it should take, and a value that tracks our navigation, so the animation can always trigger when the route changes. I hope that makes sense. Let's actually see how that works in code to give you a better understanding. So back in our app.css file, let's define the animation we want for our transition. We are going to add a fade animation, so just code along with me. So we say .fade. So we say .fade enter. So this is the animation that will start. So we want the opacity to be 0. And then we also want .fade enter active. This is the animation that will happen during the transition. So here we set the opacity, not object fix, opacity back to 1. And let's define a transition. Let's define a transition group of opacity. We want 300 seconds, 300 milliseconds, and then we want the ease in effect. All right. So this is the animation that will happen during the transition, and this is the one that will happen when the transition begins. I hope that makes sense. Then next, we also need a fade exit. As the name implies, the animation that will happen whenever the transition is about to exit. So we still want the opacity here to be 1. And then lastly, we want the fade exit active. So this is the last effect that will happen in the transition. And here we want the opacity back to 0. And then the transition group of opacity. We want 300 milliseconds again, and then ease out. I think this is pretty straightforward. This is the animation that will trigger when the transition starts. This is the animation that will trigger during the transition. And this is the animation that will trigger when the transition is exiting. And then finally, we have the animation that will trigger at the end of our transition. I hope that makes sense. Now that we've defined our CSS transition, let's head back to our app.js and make use of it. Inside of our transition component, we're going to give it a class name of fade. Now the fade class name we've given to the CSS transition will be able to track all the animations we defined in our app.css. Please don't also forget to import your app.css in your app.js file. If not, this will not work. All right. Now that we've defined our animation, there are also a few things we need to do in order for this to work. Now let's add the timeout prop. So we say timeout. We want this to run under 300 milliseconds, just as we defined in our CSS over here. We set our transition property to run under 300 milliseconds. And I think that makes sense to also define the same inside of our timeout prop. So in here, we're just going to say 300. And then also, we want to unmount our animation when it's done. So we just add an unmount prop over here. Unmount on exit. This basically is going to remove our animation when it's done running. So that means whenever this class is activated and done running, we are going to unmount the animation so the user can view the page. All right. Now we've defined our animation and its timeout and what happens when it's done running. But we also need a way for our CSS transition component to track our navigations. So it actually triggers whenever a user actually navigates. And React Router offers a use location hook that does exactly that. So let's import use location from React Router DOM. Up here, where we imported other React Router components and hooks, we can just add it over here. Say use location, just like that. Now let's initiate it into a variable. So we say const location is equal to use location, just like this. So still inside our CSS transition component, let's add our location to its key prop. So we say key is equal to location. So we say key is equal to location. So we want the path name from our location hook. So we say location.pathname. All right. I hope that makes sense. So the last thing we need to do is actually pass our location hook to our route, so it changes the location variable whenever the user navigates. And that is how the CSS transition is going to be able to track our location and actually implement our transition. So inside of our route component, we are just going to add the location prop. So we say location is equal to location. As simple as this. Now, whenever the route changes, the route component is going to change our location value, which is going to be detected by our CSS transition, and then the animation is going to activate. I hope that makes sense. And then before we head over to our browser, inside our switch transition component at the head level, we give it a component prop. And this usually takes a component in the case where you have like a wrapper component that has custom CSS. But since we don't have a base wrapper component, we are just going to give it a value of null. All right. Now let's finally head back to our browser and test this out. Let's refresh the page. And then let's click on one of the links from the navbar. If I click on the user's link, you can see the navbar animates. But if you look at our main component, it doesn't animate upon transition. Let's go back to the user's page. Pay closer attention and see. See, the navbar animates and then the component changes abruptly. That is not what we want. We want the entire page to animate, not just the navbar. So what's the problem? So this is the problem with nested routes. As you can see, we nested all of our routes inside of our navbar route here. The easiest solution to this is to unnest our routes and find a better way to display our navbar. Now, since we want the navbar in all of our pages, we can head to our index.js file where we have our browser router component wrapping our app component, and we can simply add our nav component above it. So in here, we can have our navbar component just like this. This will do the exact same thing we wanted when we nested the component inside of our nav component. Now with this, we can unnest our component. So let's actually delete our nav route. Just like this, and with this we have unnested our components. All of our components now sit right inside of our route component. And this nav component will now be able to track all of our navigations since all other routes are directly under it. As weird as this might seem, this is the convention. And it really does offer a more robust way to display our navbar. Let's actually head back to our browser and see if this works. Now back in our browser, if I refresh, you see we still have our nav exactly the way it used to be before we unnested the component. Now let's click on one of these links from our navbar and see if everything animates. If I click on users, you see we have a smooth animation all over our page. If I click on login, we have animation. Let's actually test our login. And if we log in, we still have our animation being displayed for us. If we head back to our home page, you see our animation works perfectly the way we want it to. It's okay if this lesson was confusing or overwhelming for you. We just need more practice to grasp these concepts, as with everything in this industry. And that practice, you are going to get enough of it as we build more projects in the later parts of this course. Alright guys, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to implement lazy loading for improved performance. But what is lazy loading? In simple terms, lazy loading is a design pattern. It allows you to load parts of your application on demand to reduce the initial load time. For example, you can initially load the components and modules in the home page, then you can load the rest of the components based on user navigation. Now let's see how we can implement lazy loading in React Router. First, we identify the routes and components that we need to lazy load. These are typically components that are not required immediately when the application loads. So for us, those will be all other components apart from our home page components. So that means we can lazy load all other routes and components apart from our home page route. Then we replace the import statement of those components with dynamic import using React Lazy function. Let's see how that works. We are going to start with our users component and see how we can import that using React Lazy. So down here, we are just going to say const users. And this is going to clash with this component, but eventually we are going to have to delete this. So let's just see how that works for now. So const users, then is equal to, so we are going to grab the lazy hook from React. So that will be react.lazy. Just like this. And this takes a fallback function, as you can see, for the component we want to import. So in here, we are just going to declare an arrow function and then import the component we want to import. Since this is for the users component, we are simply going to import it here. So we are just going to copy the import path from the direct import we did, copy, and then we'll paste it in here. That's all. So this is basically how we lazy load a component. We simply import it using react.lazy, just like this. And we're having this error because the users is already defined up here. Now let's clear the direct import since we've imported it using React Lazy. Alright, now let's do the same for all of our components except for our homepage component, since we want to lazy load all other components. As you can see, we don't have React imported here. So I'm just going to import. Now let's actually destructure lazy from React. Rather than having react.lazy, we can simply have lazy. So where we have our React import next to our use state, we're just going to say lazy. And then we can remove the React, just like this. To do this for the rest of the components, I'm just going to copy and paste this code. And then we simply start changing them one by one. Next, let's do the same for our user profile page. So I'm just going to copy the name user profile and then the path to the component. Paste it in here. Next, I'll do for our search user component. Change this and then we copy the path. And then we update this also. Next, we'll do the same for our login component. Change this and then we copy the path. And then we update that also. Oh, sorry, I mistakenly clicked Ctrl C. And then we replace that also. We still have a few other components to do, so let's just copy and paste all of these again. So we have like 3. We have our auth profile. Copy the path. And then we paste it in here. So we'll do the same for our about component. So over here, and then we copy the path and then update it. So we are not going to lazy load our homepage component because that is the component we want to load immediately a user enters the application. So it doesn't make sense to lazy load that component. We have an extra import here which is not needed. You can clear that. And then all the components we've lazy loaded, we can simply remove all their direct imports. So I'm just going to copy from auth profile down to our user profile. Oops, we forgot our not found component which we want to lazy load also. So I'm just going to create another one. Add our not found component, and then we copy the path just like this, and then we can remove that. We no longer have our navbar in the app.js file, so we can also remove that. And then yes, we also lazy loaded our about us page, so that can go. Now instead of directly importing all components, we've lazy loaded some of them, and those are the ones we don't need when the application initially loads. So the home component that is needed when the application loads immediately is going to load way faster than it used to because all other components have been delayed. Alright, as much as this offers a better performance for our application, if your application is big enough, it can still mean that a user has to wait for a lazy loaded component to load when they try to access that component, and they will see a white or blank page for a few seconds. That is really not ideal for user experience. Well, React offers a component called suspense, and this component provides a solution to that problem. Let's import the suspense component and then see what it does. So import suspense. So the suspense component allows you to show a fallback UI while the lazy loaded component is being loaded. So we can create a simple H1 that shows loading or some other component of our choice before the lazy loaded component finish loading. Let's see how that works actually. Now all we need to do is we need to wrap our route inside of our suspense component. So I'm just going to cut the route over here and everything inside of it. And then we declare our suspense component. And inside of here, we can paste our routes. Alright. And then we can define our fallback prop. Say fallback. And here we can put in a component we want to show before the lazy loaded components actually show up. So for this one, we just want to show loading. We can easily use a H1 tag. H1 that shows loading. Just like this. Now, if we head back to our browser and test this, we might not see the loading from the suspense component. And that's because this application has relatively small components, so they should be able to load up pretty quickly, even when we are using lazy loading. Let's see for ourselves. So let's go to the home page. So if we go to the home page and refresh our application, let's try navigating to another page and see if we will see our loading. You see, we don't see any loading. This might be because of the animation we added, or this might also be the fact that our users page is a relatively small component, so it doesn't need a lot of time to load up. But by the time you have a complex and big application, this is a real game changer. So if you don't get any errors as you are testing yours and everything seems to be working fine, that's a great sign and you can just assume it works. But by the time we build more complex applications, you really see the power of lazy loading. Alright my friends, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn about code splitting and route configuration. Instead of defining routes in line, you can create a separate configuration file to manage your routes. This approach allows for better organization and separation of code. You can define any array of route objects that specify the path, component, and any other necessary properties for each route. Then you can map over this array to render the routes dynamically. Let's see how that works. First, back in our code, let's create a route.js file. Since this is not going to be a component, we are not going to create this inside of our component folder. So inside of our source folder, rather, we're going to create the file routes.js, and this is where we are going to dynamically define our routes. So this is going to be a list of objects containing all our routes. So we say export const, and then we're going to name it app routes, and this is going to be a list. All right, before we actually define the objects, let's import all of our page components into this file. So we can simply go back to our app.js file and copy all the lazy imported components over here first. Go back to our route.js, right above our routes, then we paste that in, just like this. You can see we also need to import lazy from React. So we're just going to import lazy, and that should be from React, just like this. So we're also going to import our home component as it's not part of these. So home, we don't have a suggestion here. Import home from /component/home, just like this. Now all of our components we need are imported over here. Now let's create the routes for them. Inside of our square brackets, let's create object for them. So each route needs a path and component property. So let's define the path. We're going to start with our home page. So the path for our home page is obviously just a / because it's the index. And then the component, we're going to define the component and we're going to set that to our home, just like this. Now we can simply copy and paste this object and modify it for each route. But before we actually do that, I want to bring something to your attention. There's one more property we need to add. If we head back to our app.js file, we have a guarded route over here, which is our auth profile route. And this route is only going to be accessible to the user if the user is authenticated. Now, if we define our routes merely by having a path and component, it's going to be difficult for us to render our guarded routes. So for that, we are going to add another property, which is requires auth. And we are going to define this in all of our routes and set it to false where it is not needed. Our home page doesn't need the user to be authenticated to display, so we are going to set that to false. And when we get to our auth profile, we are obviously going to set that to true. Now let's copy and paste this object and modify it for each of our routes. Copy, paste. I'm just going to paste like 5 of it and then change them one by one first. Now let's move to our login, /login, and that will take the login component. It doesn't require auth. Now let's go to our users page, /users, and it's going to take the users component, or not user profile. Now here's where we're going to add our auth profile component, auth profile. And this is the component that needs the user to be authenticated. So the component is auth profile and requires auth is now going to be true. This is what I was talking about. All right, what other pages do we have? We have user profile and search user. So we're just going to say /search. I think that's what we used. That should be search user component. It doesn't require auth. And then we need like 3 more. What else? Auth profile, user profile. What was the route for the user profile we defined? Let's check that. User profile is /user. Oh, it's /user, / okay, this is our user profile path. I'm just going to copy that. Where is it? Okay, I'll just paste that in here. All right, so we just say user profile. It doesn't require authentication. What other routes? About us are not found. So here we just want about us, doesn't require authentication. And then for the last one, so the last one is going to be our not found component, and this is going to be the wildcard symbol or star. I think we've explained this before. So whenever the user goes to another page that is not defined within this, the not found component is going to display. So let's actually change that. Not found, it doesn't require authentication. All right, now we've defined all of our routes inside of this route.js file. Now let's head back to our app.js and implement this. First of all, let's import our routes. So import app routes. All right, in the routes wrapper over here, we're going to clear all the routes inside of it, and then we're going to open curly braces and use a map function to map through all of our app routes we defined in our routes.js file. So that means we're just simply going to do app routes.map, and then for each route we want to render, and in here we're going to define how each route is rendered. All right, if you recall, we have a route that is guarded, which means the user can only access that route only if the user is authenticated. I know I've said this a billion times before, so just bear with me. So now we'll start by adding a condition that checks if a route needs authentication to render, and then we'll put the logic there, and if not, we'll just display the route to the user. So just code along with me. So we say if route dot requires, if route does requires auth, and then not is logged. So we want to check if the user is not authenticated for the route that requires authentication. If that is the case, we want to return the user to the login page, just like we did before using the navigate component from React Router. All right, so if this case is true, we simply return. So we are going to return a route. And then in here, we can simply pass the key property to it. And this is going to be route dot path. And then we want this to be exact. And then the path prop is going to be route dot path, just like this. And this is where we define the redirect component. If you recall, we use the navigate component to redirect the user back to the login page if the user is not authenticated for pages that require authentication. So this element prop is simply going to be our navigate component is going to replace this component and is going to take the user to /login. Should be /, just like this. So if this condition is false, so we say else, every other route will be accessible. So simply we'll just render the rest of the route inside of our else statement. So else, we want to return. Here we define a route, and inside the route we give it a key prop of route dot path. We add the exact prop, and then the path prop is going to be route dot path, and then the element is going to be, now the element over here obviously needs a React component, so we can't just say route.component. We have to declare that as an element by itself. So here we open angle brackets and you can see route.component, just like this. And this is how we add our routes in our element prop. All right, if we head back to our code, you can see this works perfectly for our home page. But a problem might arise when we try to get to the authenticated user profile page. You can see we have an error, set username is not a function. Let's see what this is. Back in our component, let's go to the login.js file. You can see the login component takes props, set is logged and set username, and so does the auth profile.js file. This component also takes a username prop. And back in our routes, we didn't specify any prop for the route over here. We can simply pass our props inside of our elements property over here. So inside react.component, and if you also hover over it, you are going to see the props some of the components need, and that shows you that you can actually define them inside of this place. So where you have route.component, we can simply pass our props, set is logged, and that should come from set is logged, which we already defined over here. As you can see, we also need the set username and username. So we have set username, and then username will be equal to username. So when we define the props like this, whichever component needs one of them is just going to pick it up. Now let's head back to our code and see if this works now. Let's try and log in. So the username is Kolosafo and the password is 12345. If I hit submit, we have a page not found over here. Did we make a mistake in our routing? Let's go back to our route and see. Oh, the problem is that we set the path to app profile rather than auth profile. So let's change that. I'm just going to change this to auth profile, just like this. If I head back to our browser, let's refresh. Let's try and log in again. Go Wcislo 1 2 3 4 5. Submit. As you can see, everything works fine. Let's refresh our page to see if the auth profile route is still protected. So if I click the profile, we get redirected to our login page because the user is not authenticated. So that functionality still works. And again, if I log in, Wcislo 1 2 3 4 5, you see the page is now accessible. All right, everything seems to be working perfect. So if we head back to our code and go to our app.js, you see our code looks more robust. And whenever we want to add a new route, we can just go to our route.js file, and then we can handle implementing that routing over here. That's a lot more convenient than having everything clustered in your app.js file. All right.
Hello guys. So I've been mentioning that there's going to be another project where we will solidify our knowledge of React Router. But I know that there will be a majority of you who are okay with what you've learned already, and you don't need more to understand these concepts. For that reason, the course will end after one more lesson. But in order to keep my promise, for those of you who will want to build another project with me to understand React Router better, I have uploaded the last project over at my YouTube channel, and you can go ahead and watch it over there. I want to congratulate you and thank you at the same time for watching the course till the end. I really hope you have become better using React Router. Last but not the least, if you like my teaching style and would like to see more and related courses from me, I ask that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned.
Alright guys, welcome to the final lesson of this section before we head over to building a project from scratch by ourselves, which is where you solidify your knowledge of React Router. Alright, in this lesson, we just want to make sure if we click on this button over here, it takes us to the user detail page. And also if we click on this, it takes us to a repo details page. Right now, if you click on it, it does nothing. And it's actually a button inside of a button. So we're going to fix that and just see how everything works. I just need you to code along with me. So if we go back to the home.js, first of all, we need to tackle this user button here to take us to the user details page. All right, that should be this. So this button, we simply need to turn it. Should we turn it into a link, or we should just use a navigate? We should use a navigate function here. Let's see. Let's try turning this to a link first and see how it looks like. So we're just gonna say 2, and that should go to /users. Let me just check the URL. Let me just check the route name again. User details page, user, and then the username. All right. Back to our home page. Users, user, and then /. Oh, we need to use backticks, but that's okay. I'm just going to remove this and this. Okay, that should be user.login. Oh yeah, this is it, user.owner.login. So we'll just copy that and paste in here, just like that. Let's head over to our browser and test it. Okay, it doesn't look like a button anymore. We want it to look like that. So I think it would be better we just use the button elements rather than the link element. But if I click on it, okay, it works. And let's head back and try that again actually. Now let's click on this guy over here. All right, it works. But like we said, we want this to be a button and not a link. Actually, we can just leave this like this. We don't really need to turn this to a button, because if we turn it to a button, it will be quite the same as this. I think it's better we just leave it as a link. All right, that one is done. Now we are just going to fix this. You can see it's kind of like we have nested buttons in here. We don't want that. We want a single button that has an on-click element, or we can wrap a link element inside of it rather. So this is it here. As you can see, view repo. It's a button inside of a button, and we are simply just going to turn this into a link too. So we won't be using any use navigate function over here. So link, and that is going to link to view repo. Okay, the page we need to view the repo detail hasn't been created, so we need to go ahead and create that. Let's head back to our route and add the path to it. So we can just copy and paste this, and then we can say repo detail, and that's component, and that should be repo detail, just like that. Let's add it next to the repos. Okay, that's the home page. Let's just add it below, before the not found route. So we'll copy the about route, paste it in here, and then we'll say this should be repo detail, and this is supposed to take 2 parameters, right? So back in our repo detail.js file, we have 2 parameters here. We're expecting the name of the repo and the username of the repo owner. So we're just going to copy that, head back here, put a / and then column for the parameter you want. We'll paste that in. First we need the name parameter, / column, and then the next parameter. This is how we do it. So now just need to use the repo detail. Does it need authentication? No, it doesn't. All right, let's refresh our code back in the browser, see if we don't have any errors. If I refresh, yeah, I think you see we don't have any errors. Now let's implement the functionality where if we click on this button, it takes us to the new repo detail page we just created. All right, back to our home page. So this view repo link over here, it should take us / repo detail. That's just the new path we just created, and we can copy it also. Repo detail / username and /. So back in our home, we actually need to turn this into a backtick since we're adding a variable to the path. So we'll just copy that in here, and then we can change them one by one. So for the name, it's $. So this is the name of the repo. I think we used it up here. All right, so that should be repo.name. Paste that, and then the username of the repo owner, that should be repo owner.login. We copy that, our $ curly braces, and then we paste that in there. Now I think that should be all. Let's head back to our browser and see if it works. First, I'm just going to give it a refresh. All right, now let's click on the first repo. We should now see that it works. Now we actually added functionality to go to the user details page when we click on this button. So let's test that. Click on it. Right, it takes us to the user detail page. Everything seems to be working fine. All right, my friends, we've had to digest quite a lot for this course. I know it's a lot for you guys, but don't worry, when we build the next project from scratch, I think that is where you start to grasp these concepts. And when you also do your own projects afterwards, that is when you solidify all the concepts for React Router. And always remember, I'll be here to help you out whenever you need anything at all regarding this course. Thank you so much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.